Hey there, it's Dee. Today I have the story of my parents' marriage. It's a sad story. I hope that I don't discourage all of you because many lessons have been learned from that example of a difficult marriage. Now, my mom was born in Austria, Vienna, Austria, and my dad was born in a small town called Larned, Kansas, and he was over in Europe. Met in Scotland at a church. He was there doing missionary work, and she was a member of that church. So they married under the guise of we're going to be missionaries together. So they did marry there in Scotland, took the Queen Elizabeth home to live in Kansas with my dad's parents. And my dad didn't have his degree finished yet. He was going to be a teacher, so they needed to stay with them for a while, and it was quite traumatic. My mother told me these stories mostly when I was an adult in my 20s, so she would have been in her 60s when she was telling me this. So they were quite a number of years difference in age. My mother was actually 13 years older than my dad. He was 21, she was 34 when they married. There was some controversy about this, and I did find the roster on the Queen Elizabeth, and there were two separate documents. One that showed that she was born in 1921, and one that showed she was born in 1927. So the corrected one did show 1921. If you remember from the Wicked Sister story, my sister was really trying to sabotage this whole relationship as she is an adult living in Germany, was trying to harm that marriage by telling my dad that my mother had lied and that she'd have a man and so on and so forth. It was just not pretty, okay? So my mother was a petite, 5 foot, very charming, beautiful European. She had reddish golden hair. She was articulate. She was smart. She had a degree in nursing, was an assistant to a surgeon. Just a lovely person, a lovely caring person. That's my recollection of her, even though as we go along, I will tell you some things about the drama of her PTSD, okay? So this lovely woman comes to Kansas. All right, farm country, real simple laid back folks. And as soon as they get to the home, my grandmother, my dad's mom, brought out in front of my mother a bunch of letters that this girl that had the hots for my dad, or maybe they were dating before he went on his mission, but she had written all these letters, and my grandmother had kept them. And in front of my mother hands him this big packet of these letters. We'll call her Mary Lou. I don't remember her name. And my dad goes upstairs in this farmhouse, locks himself in that room for days. For days. Like 2 days at least. And is reading through all of these letters. The treatment of my mother by him then became like, why did I marry this woman when I had this woman who was hot for me all along, right? So then it's like that kind of was the beginning of it for my mother's recount, that he had rejected her. Okay, his mother and most of the other family members did the same rejection of my mother. Remember, she has a strong accent. It's a very soft, lovely, Germanic kind of an accent. But they would shun her away from the table. They put a chair away from the table, like the slave reject, for her to eat. They would not have conversation with her. They completely ignored her. There was only one, Aunt Sadie, and I remember Aunt Sadie with her big puffy cheeks, and just so soft-spoken like this. She was just a lovely, lovely woman. She's the only one that treated my mother with respect and love. So my parents eventually did get another home in another small town when my dad got his degree. And I remember we lived in about 4 or 5 different small towns in Kansas. As he was finishing his degree, he was getting jobs and ended up in the small town of Washington, Kansas, before we moved to Los Angeles. Okay, so during that time, my mother was not working. She had my sister, and that would have been June of 1957. They came across in 1956. So then she got pregnant with me about a year later. I was born in 1959. And so she had kids, right? And there is not like here, where you go and bring them to the daycare. You didn't have that. And he was able to finish his degree and get a good teaching job in Washington, is where they ended up. Okay, so during this time, my mother didn't have much to say about anything specific that he did. Okay, he was off at school for long periods of time, for months, and then he would come home for a holiday. So of course it's fine, right? Because he is away. The trouble started when worse, so we'll call it worse than what my grandmother and other family members did to her in shunning her. That when we moved to Washington, my mother was able to get a job as a nurse working the night shift. She also had given birth to my brother about a year earlier. So he was despised by my father. So I'm not going to say this because I'm prejudiced or anything, all right? But I'm just going to tell you that my dad had a roommate in college, that's what my mother said, that he was a gay guy. And I don't know what happened, if there was things that my dad witnessed or what, but he had told my mother, I never want a boy. And so he was cruel to my brother. He would beat him with yardsticks till they broke. For like, he pooped his pants. Okay, so he was the poor kid was pooping his pants because he was scared to death, right? And my mother just overprotected him because she was so afraid of what my dad would do to him. So his beginning years of school, his kindergarten through, I think it was 3rd grade when we finally moved to Los Angeles. From there, my mother was so overprotective, and just that the hatred that ensued from that, I never remember a tender moment between them. I did later. There were some moments that I remember that were sweet, but there was mostly contention. There was hatred of things that my mother would do for us kids. He didn't believe in gifts for children. He didn't believe that we should have toys. He was very male dominant, very religious in his beliefs. Okay, remember, they were married under the idea of being missionaries together in Christendom, right? There were multiple churches that they went to, and my mother had good friends in those congregations, but they were short-lived because they had kept moving from town to town. And then in Los Angeles, so oh my gosh, you guys, think about this. If you've ever done this, tell me about your experience too. I was 9. Okay, so we moved from this itty bitty town of maybe 200, Washington, Kansas, to central Los Angeles. Okay, there were only white people, only little farm people, really simple farm people. And then now, we're in a church that's, everybody is different. There are Asians and people from Nigeria. I went to school with Chicanos, like primarily Chicanos and blacks. I learned that we're just people. Okay, that's all I ever knew. I never even thought, oh my God, what is that? We're just people. And in Christ, we just accepted each other. I never knew anything different than that. My mother never knew anything different than that. And we were not taught anything different than that. Okay, but it was a challenge. It was huge into this big city, right? Well, my father was really trying to get in with the big guys in the church. Okay, he would spend a lot of time. Like, we would have many evenings that he would have to go to church meetings, and it was we had to go on Sundays. We had to go on Wednesdays. He had to go for meetings on Saturday. His whole life was revolved around that. Okay, so my mother was not allowed to learn to drive. Okay, it's one of those male dominant things. Okay, where my mother was given one lesson by him. She did drive in Europe. Okay, but now we're talking, steering wheel's on the other side. She got confused. She rolled into the ditch. It was not a problem. Like, they got out. It was not a big deal. But he told her she could never drive. Okay, so here's this educated, lovely woman who now is completely stuck in this big city with knowing nobody, nowhere to go. The church women she couldn't congregate with because they're doing their own things. They have their own families, and she just was not part of that. Maybe once again because she was so different. What do you think about that? I think because she was so different. Maybe they were jealous of her. Maybe they were something about her was just a little bit too strong or too much. I'm not sure. I know that my dad would go and, particularly this one elder's wife, because she didn't drive, he would drive her all over the place. So that my mother would have screaming fits and break dishes, and they would yell at each other. So in my youth, okay, so now, it's just really escalating with this contention between them. This hatred started to grow. And why did we move there? We moved there for church. We moved to Los Angeles for a church, for something that is better in living in Christ, and to be part of this movement. Okay, so now my dad is rejecting her more. She's like babysitting kids in the house just to have some money. My sister, she gets a car. Okay, he buys her a car. I didn't get to have a car. I had to buy it myself when I turned 18. So he is like doting over my sister and helping the other church women. So my mom was going through menopause. Remember, she's 13 years older, right? So I remember I was, oh gosh, maybe I was like 15 or 16 at the time. I'm thinking 16 when she was really in the heat of menopause and coming home. Like, they never had alcohol in the house. She got some black Manischewitz wine and drank the whole thing, and she puked out her fake teeth. She had dentures. I didn't even know that until she puked them out the front window in the home in Los Angeles. So she was trying to escape and figure out what to do all of these years because she never had support and love. Okay, so we're going to skip forward. I'm told all these stories by her. Even into her 80s, she still had good mind. And she would call me up sobbing. It was like, if you just think of the brain, how we just like press like that, the pressing of all those horrible things that happen to us deeper into the mind. And then as time goes on and those layers slough off, they just come to the surface. She would call me sobbing and tell me my dad had pounded her head into the shower wall and that he had beat her. And it's like, I never knew this. I knew they fought all the time. My mother was always yelling, and he would demean her. So me as an adult now, so like I'm in my 40s, I've got kids, and I'm witnessing this stuff. After my mother's told me this, I start to look at him in a little bit different way, right? That, wow, I knew he was dumb, and I knew he favored my sister over me, and that he was an unrighteous religious man. Okay, righteous and religious are not equal. And I told him, you stop talking to mother this way. You criticize her, you say free show, like wife in like a dialect. And he would like tell her to stop talking, or like shrug his shoulders and just like try and shut her up constantly. She brought artwork that she had done to me, and she had taken this class. She loved art as a young woman. She loved music as a young woman, and she refound it in her 50s. And she would paint these beautiful pictures. To me, they were beautiful. And my father would just like wrinkle his eyes. Man, that's fair. Never would allow her to hang any of her artwork. And some of it was really, really nice. Like, you would be proud. Wow, I didn't know you had such skill. Okay, so now more times, we're going to fast forward, and she dies. My son was at that funeral. I was not able to go, but he had it on speaker. You would not believe. I heard him, my father, sobbing, saying, she loved me. She really loved me. And I never accepted. I never, ever accepted that she really, really loved me. His pity, his regret, his anger at himself was there, just flowing out of him in front of all these people, sobbing. Too late. It's too late. And I hope that he found peace. I really do hope that in time he did find peace with that. But I tell you what, my learning from that was when I started screaming. I would scream at the kids. I would scream at my husband. That was my answer. My husband does not hear me. He does not see me. He doesn't recognize my value. He doesn't appreciate me. And I would scream. And that is what my mother did. She felt completely left out. And that was the only thing that she could do, was just scream. She would scream at everything. So I was a hospice nurse when I had heard myself doing this. I'm doing the same thing. And I don't know, how old was I? Probably in my late 30s at the time. Did I still scream on occasion? Sure, because, let things build up. But I realized that when I talked to my mother about my husband and she did not like him, she came to love him. And that relationship was repaired, thankfully. And it became a beautiful forgiveness thing. But I saw that when I talked to my mother about my husband, I would criticize him much more, and I would look at him in different eyes. When I would listen to my mother talk about how my sister would criticize my mother to my father, I said, wow, this is history, isn't it? My mother suffered the same thing with her mother. My dad was doing the same thing to my brother, rejecting him like my mother's mother did to her and rejected her. My sister was trying to marry me off to some German that was hot for me from when he saw me at her wedding or something. Oh, no, he would marry you. He is very well to do. He has a doctorate, I'm trying to break up my marriage with my husband. It's like, what is this sabotage thing happening here? And it made me draw closer to my husband because I saw it. And I saw the pain that came from this kind of constant judgment of people, to have lost all of those years of love. She loved me and I didn't know it. He lost all those years of love. And I saw my mother, she would dote over him. Dovey, would you like some more, Dovey? Really trying to appease him constantly. And she would get in return. She had nothing. No tenderness and no love. All in the guise of, we're married in Christ. I am married in Christ now, right? I married my husband, because we had a child together and it was the right thing to do. And I learned to love him. And I've learned that with my sons, their marriages, don't mess with that. Don't go talking about the wife. If there's something you're concerned about, you talk to the wife, right? So, I just have learned to value their love and their family and their choices in marriage. And I tell you what, that is healthy. I almost lost my relationship with my eldest son and his wife because of judgment. I am so grateful to God, so grateful that there was healing in that. And it's strong. It is strong now. Just watch yourself, folks. Watch that judgment. Watch how you talk to other people about your beloved. I call my husband beloved. About your kids' wives. Sometimes there's some really scary, bad things, like you need to tell them, this is unsafe, this is unhealthy. You please protect yourself. Sometimes you need to do that, but if it's just because you're judging, because they're different, because they're not like you, maybe you're jealous of them. Maybe there's something about them that you wish that you had, so instead you criticize them. That's a dirty underdog. So, go look at your beloveds and say, I love you. Say, and look at them and how they look at you. They really love me. My husband writes me sweet little notes. Have a good day, babe. I save them. They're precious. They are precious to me. Okay, so go find some preciousness in your life and value that before you find yourself sobbing because you missed out because of judgment. All right. Thanks for listening to the story. See ya.